You're listening to Mad Mike's Smile Time Variety Cast.
Hello everyone, bonjour tabarnak, and welcome to another episode of the Smile Time Variety Cast. As per usual, this is your host Mad Mike talking, and I am in a very celebratory mood right now, because as of recording this, yours truly has officially been monetized by YouTube. That is right, I have officially been accepted into the YouTube Partner Program, and now I can start making money from this. So I thought I'd open up the episode with that, and I want to talk about that a little bit because there is a lot of emotions to process with this. It was funny, I was at my girlfriend's place when this all went down. We got up at around 6:30 the morning before recording this, and I wanted to go back to bed because I was working at 3, and I always try to sleep as much as I can on work days. And so, got up, spent some time together, and ate breakfast and all that, and then I decided to go back for a nap. Before I take my nap, I checked my phone, and I opened up my email, and then I got the email, and it said, "Congrats, Mad Mike, you've been accepted into the YouTube Partner Program," and it happened. It happened. 3 years of this. 3 years of self-doubt. 3 years of, just wondering if I'm wasting my time. 3 years of betting on me. And finally, it fucking happened. And, I'm still kind of processing the emotions right now, and and I know some people are just like, finding this embarrassing if they're listening to it or anything or something like that. I don't know, and it really is amazing, and some people laugh at this idea of going after this crazy dream, but I don't care. It's my dream, and I'm fucking chasing it, and the dream's coming true. Being able to earn money from expressing yourself and from your own creations. It's phenomenal. It really is. And, this... it's such a good feeling for me because this was a big risk, and I was fully aware of the risk. 3 years ago, I graduated film school, and it was right in the middle of the pandemic. I had no job opportunities anywhere, and I decided, I'm going to bet on myself. Why? Because, I always wanted to make my own content. And that's one of the reasons. Second reason is I'm beyond stubborn as fuck, and I know that I have something to offer this industry, and I wanted to do it no matter what, by any means necessary. And so I decided to start this channel, and it's taken 3 years. 3 years of blood, sweat, tears, hard work, sleepless nights, sacrifice, people turning their backs on me, relationships failing, friendships falling out, and everything and anything in between to reach this fucking goal, and I have. It really is amazing, and sorry, I'm really trying to keep it together, but And I know that this really isn't that big of an accomplishment in the grand scheme of things. I'm still only at 1,300 subscribers, which is peanuts. I'm still technically just small potatoes, and I know that this monetization is only going to lead to, enough for a coffee once a month maybe, but I don't care. Getting to the point where I could be paid money regardless of how little it is to express myself and make my own creations. It's an amazing feeling, and it shows me that all of this isn't for nothing. And it's a victory for me, but it's a victory for all of you, everyone listening to this, because you guys watched this stuff, you guys subscribed, you guys shared, you guys made this happen. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna pretend to not have an ego. I made this happen too. It was my hard work that you guys noticed. It was my talent that you guys noticed. It was my dedication, my passion that you all noticed and made sure that more people would notice. And, so thank you for doing your part. It's a big part. So to anyone listening to this, thank you so much. It really means a lot. And the fellow creators who do watch my stuff as well, you guys played a big part in this too. You are one of the many reasons this happened. Thank you for sharing my work. Thank you for telling everybody about my work. Thank you for offering me your audience whenever you guys saw fit. You guys played a part in this happening, and that's never going to be lost on me. So thank you so much. It's a victory for all of you. It's a victory for me. And this happening, it's also a victory for people who've felt slighted in their lives. It's a victory for people who felt like they've never been given their due, or never been given their respect, or never been given the opportunities that they felt like they earned. Because, I'm sure there's at least one person listening to this right now who feels slighted in their life, who feels like they haven't been given, a fair hand, who feels like, the people around them don't respect them enough. You know what? If you feel that way, that is okay, because I'm right there with you. I know how it feels to be slighted. I know how it feels to not be given your due. And I know how it feels to have the world around you call you entitled or spoiled or a brat or whatever because your talents are not respected or because your work ethic isn't being noticed. I know how it feels. And if you think I'm entitled or you think anybody else is entitled, fuck you, okay? Because there is nothing entitled about wanting rewards for your hard work. There is nothing entitled about wanting your talents to get noticed. So if you want to use the E word, get fucked. But anyways, back to the topic at hand. Yours truly, Mad Mike, is now monetized. And it's an amazing feeling for so many reasons. And I want to thank you all. I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart, the bottom of my brain, the bottom of my ass. It really means the world to me that this happened. Everyone listening to this right now, you all played a part in it. So this is a good day. So that's it for the intro to this podcast. We are now going to move on to the rapid fire album reviews. I'm only reviewing 2 new albums this month because I'm focusing a lot of my time on a big project that I will be announcing shortly, but I only have 2 new albums to review, plus my classic album review, which will be on Morbid Angel's Blessed Are the Sick, and as per usual, I will have a Q&A segment at the end of the show. That's what's on tap for today. Once again, thank you very much for helping this monetization happen. Moving on. And the first album we are reviewing this month is the new Avengers 7-game album, Row, Row, Row Your Boat. This, of course, is the new massively overhyped album by a tired legacy act that hasn't been relevant in over 10 years, and it'll be forgotten about in 3 weeks, just like the new In Flames. First of all, holy fuck, M. Shadows can't fucking sing. I mean, even at his best, he was never really anything beyond an okay singer, but holy fuck, his voice is completely shot. And yes, I know he's had some issues with his vocal cords recently, but that is no fucking excuse. James Hetfield blew out his voice. Vince Neil blew out his voice. Bruce Dickinson's voice has gotten way worse as he's aged. I don't cut them any slack, and I sure as shit am not gonna cut any slack for M fucking Shadows. Peyton Manning's neck injuries made him unable to throw a football, and he was dragged to a Super Bowl by his defense. That is a fact. M Shadows has suffered vocal damage, and he can't fucking sing anymore. That is also a fact. You are not above criticism just because you had a fucking injury. Quality is still expected of you. Rant over. Alright, now that I'm done complaining about the singing, the rest of the album is okay at best. Most of the time, I was being reminded of that painfully pretentious Sleep Token album, only here, the experimentation feels like it's coming from a genuine place, even though it's not really that good. In listening to the album, I can sense that this is a band that is genuinely willing to try new things and are pulling out all the stops. Unfortunately, all of this experimentation just winds up being a big, jumbled, disjointed mess for me. For example, on the first 4 tracks, the album does this thing that is turning into a massive cliche for me, and it is really starting to get old. It's this quiet, loud crap that Ginger did on Pisces, and now every fucking band is trying to do the same shit because it'll get them reaction clicks all over YouTube. It's played out, it's old, and it needs to fucking stop. And then you have the track Cosmic, which might be the only time on the album that I actually feel like I'm listening to an actual song, with structure and setups and payoffs. Unfortunately, that's all it is. A song. It's definitely one of the songs. I can appreciate the structure and I can appreciate the thought that went into it, but the riffs are still generic, the solos still feel phoned in, and the vocals are auto-tuned to fucking death. And then it moves on to this painful Alice in Chains worship song called Beautiful Morning, where Shadows continues to drone along like he's bored out of his mind, and it makes me bored out of my mind. The album then prods along with 5 more predictable and forgettable tracks that turn this into a complete waste of time. It's the same experimental, quiet, loud bullshit that I was just complaining about. And there's really not much more to dive into on this one. It's an Avenged Sevenfold album in 2023. Not the worst thing I've heard this year, but it's still not good. And M. Shadows' voice is still painful to listen to. Seriously, if that's how good it's gonna get, then I think it's time for him to hang it up. And the next and final review for this month is King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard with their latest album, PetroDragonic Apocalypse, or Dawn of Eternal Night, an annihilation of planet Earth and the beginning of a merciless damnation. Wow, like Sasha Grey once said, that was a mouthful. So anyways, this is my first time ever listening to this band, and I feel like I say that a lot, and I think it's solid overall. The music and production gives off a big vibe of classic new wave of British heavy metal bands like Saxon and Diamond Head. For example, tracks like Supercell make me feel like I'm listening to something off Lightning to the Nations. There were also many times where I was given a modern stoner doom vibe, similar to something like The Sword. There were even times where I felt like I was listening to early thrash. The tracks Converge and Gila Monster actually felt like something off Killing Is My Business era Megadeth. King Gizzard does a really good job on this album of combining old school feeling metal with old school acid rock, and it all adds up to some pretty fun songs if I do say so myself. I also really like Stu McKenzie's vocals. He gives off a Rob Halford, Blackie Lawless type vibe in his vocal performance, and it totally fits the type of music the band is trying to play. Some of the lead work is very reminiscent of this time period too. Literally everything about this album screams old school heavy metal. My big complaint is I feel like a lot of trimming could have been done with the tracks. Most of the songs, while fundamentally good, go on for a bit too long for my liking, and tracks like Motor Spirit and Converge run out out of steam a little too early. This is especially egregious on the last two tracks, Dragon and Flamethrower, which are about 5 minutes longer than they need to be. Thankfully, it makes up for that flaw by including some really tightly composed anthems like Witchcraft and Gila Monster. Overall, though, this is a solid album that I might see myself enjoying more on repeat listens. And if you're into some old school heavy metal, this is the album for you. And now it is time for the classic album review. And this month I am reviewing Morbid Angel's sophomore masterpiece, Blessed Are the Sick. Bit of a background before I get into it. Morbid Angel, aka God's gift to death metal, at least at the time, was founded in 1983 by guitarist Trey Isaac-Toth and drummer-vocalist Mike Browning. After a bunch of lineup changes and all the early days bio crap you read on Wiki, they released their debut demo, Abominations of Desolation, in 1986. It was supposed to be their official debut, but Trey was not happy with the initial production. The band rewrote and re-recorded this demo, culminating in their official debut album, Altars of Madness. Altars shot Morbid Angel to the death metal moon, and it has gone down as not only a masterpiece, but as my favorite album of all time. I think the latter distinction is more important, personally. But anyways, by this time, their lineup was established as David Vincent on vocals, Trey Isaac-Toth and Richard Brunel on guitar, and Pete Sandoval on drums. This was the band's equivalent of Deep Purple's Mark II lineup. In terms of pure musical chemistry, I don't think there was a stronger band in death metal at the time or now. You had one of the most gifted guitarists of all time in Trey Isaac-Toth, matched by his much more melodic counterpart Richard Brunel, together with a very ghoulish singer in Vincent, whom also happens to be a very underrated bass player, and topped out with the chaotically gifted Sandoval on drums. Together, these four guys made magic. Altars of Madness is a goated banger, and you could learn much more about that album if you click on the link in the comments. And that brings us to their follow-up, which is sadly the last time you'll ever hear these four Chads together on a record, Blessed Are the Sick. And while Altars of Madness is my favorite album of all time, Blessed Are the Sick is not too far behind. Definitely in my top 25. I've always thought it was a masterpiece, and after listening to it again, it is still a masterpiece in my opinion. It definitely takes a more experimental route than Altars does, but it's still very well structured, very well composed, and flows better than the Mississippi. There's a symphonic track, an acoustic track, a piano track, fast songs, brutal songs, doomy songs, yet it still feels seamless overall, and every moment is placed in the exact spot it needs to be. Take the first two tracks for example. The intro has this very ominous guitar doodle that slowly winds up like a violin with its strings about to break. It almost feels like it's mimicking the sound of a really old door creaking open, and then that opening door pays off with Fall from Grace as it brings you into a world where evil death metal is hitting you from all sides. Fall from Grace might be the best track on the album, which is saying a lot. It opens with this doomy, ominous riff, complemented with restrained drumming that allows it to breathe before it takes the listener into a murky hellhole of blast beats and chaos, with David Vincent's soaring growls sweeping you into a pit of fire and brimstone as he shouts, "Hot wind burns me, burning as I fall." It's one of Morbid Angel's signature tunes and completes the beginning of this album with a bang. Elsewhere on this album, you have another pair of great tracks in which the first track sets up and the second track pays off. Of course, I'm talking about Doomsday Celebration and Day of Suffering. Let me break this down here. Doomsday Celebration is one of the many risks this album took that paid right off. It's an evil-sounding symphonic track that's reminiscent of something off of Holst the Planets. It gives off this feel of a big army in hell, standing idle and waiting for the devil's call to strike. Just imagine it right now. Play the track. The devil's army is being awakened as the track is beginning, followed by them being given orders of what they have to do, which is be unleashed upon Earth. And then Hell's army is dressed, armed, and ready to fulfill their duty. And then there's a calm before the storm, followed by the intro to Day of Suffering. And that track feels like hell has been unleashed upon the earth. This is made apparent with lyrics like, "Lord of Light, I will swarm against you now. God's perverse, wicked's at my side." It's such a brilliantly evil pair of tracks, and they very well might be the best songs on the album. Then you have the legendary death metal anthem that is Blessed Are the Sick, Leading the Rats, which is exactly the doomy turn the album needed to take after Day of Suffering. The song ends with one of the heaviest riffs Trey and Richard ever put together, followed by heavy flute, which is darkly hypnotic and somehow doesn't feel out of place. This might be the best song on the album. Then you have Thy Kingdom Come, which also, like all the tracks that came before it, might be the best song on the album. You see a pattern yet? That song is highlighted by this breakdown that occurs after the chorus, which is a riff that sticks in your head as you listen to it, complemented by Pete's awesome start and stop rolls on the toms. You know which part I'm talking about. It's one of the most badass things I've ever heard, and a huge highlight on an album full of highlights. Oh, and then you have another track that might be one of the best songs on the album, Unholy Blasphemies. This song is fucking brutal. It's fast, it's furious, it doesn't waste its time. It's 2 minutes and 10 seconds of smashing you in the face with a sledgehammer forged straight from hell's brimstone. Vomit upon the cross and burn the book of lies. And then, after another chaotic, heavy tune that is Abominations, we are given the most beautiful moment on the album, which is Desolate Ways. This acoustic piece, composed by Richard Brunel, brings out emotions in me that rarely a song ever brings out. It is living proof that Morbid Angel was a better band with him in it, and how he gave the album and the band a much-needed melodic style that balanced out Trey's chaotic nature perfectly. Straight up, this is not only one of the best tracks on the album, but it might be the most beautiful acoustic song ever composed in the history of metal. It really gives off this vibe of an old, sad man looking at the world that he no longer recognizes because it was destroyed by evil forces he didn't know existed, and he can't do anything about it except just wait to die. And it's just a beautiful, gloomy guitar piece that brings out so many emotions in me. If you think Brunel didn't really matter to Morbid Angel, listen to this track again and punch yourself for being so wrong. And then you have the album's final anthem, The Ancient Ones. This also might be the best song on the album, taking you on an evil journey through shredding solos and riffs that came from all over the place. And then the album ends with In Remembrance, a beautifully gloomy piano number that brings everything home and makes you wonder what Morbid Angel will do next. Everything about this album is perfect, from Pete's impeccable drumming that knows when to restrain and when to go balls deep, to David's barking growls that sound like a ghoulish hellhound, to Trey and Richard putting on a clinic to end all clinics of riffing, soloing, and composition, to the unpredictably awesome nature of the track listing that gives you something heavy, then brutal, then melodic, then beautiful, then evil, and then back to heavy. Blessed Are the Sick is an amazing follow-up to Altars of Madness that fires on all cylinders and shows you just how gifted and dynamic this incarnation of the band was. Unfortunately, this was the last time these four masters of their craft would make an album together, as Richard Brunel was kicked out of the band due to substance abuse, and unfortunately a reunion is never going to happen now because he sadly died in 2019. That being said, Richard, if you're out there somewhere, no one will ever forget the beautiful music you composed. This album will make sure of that. And after Brunel was no longer in Morbid Angel, the chemistry of the band was never the same. They made some good stuff afterwards, but in my opinion, they never even came close to touching Altars and Blessed. Regardless of what happened afterwards, though, Blessed Are the Sick still exists, and it is one of the greatest albums ever composed. It's an inner circle, goated metal album, and has only gotten better with time. And that's it for today's classic album review. Be sure to check this one out. So this is usually the time during the episode where I go off on a rant about the metal community and something that's pissed me off or something like that, and I don't really want to do that today. Instead, I want to talk about something about the metal community that is just so pure and so good. So in case you haven't watched my previous vlog, I was in Toronto on June 8th to watch a metal show. It was Spirit World, Sepultura, Death Angel, and Creator at the the Danforth Music Hall in Toronto, and this was a fantastic gig. One of the best concerts overall I've ever seen, and I've seen plenty. And it was a great show that capped off one heck of a fucking day in Toronto. So this is something I do a lot. Like, this sounds very self-aggrandizing, but I'm a pretty deep thinker, and when big days like this happen in my life, I tend to look at like the bigger meaning of it all, or I try to think of like, you know, what's the deeper meaning in all of this? And, you know, the deeper meaning in this day, when I went to that show, hung out with those people, the more I think about it, the more I believe that day was a microcosm for why I got into metal in the first place. So I'm going to wind back the clock a little bit. I'm going to go back to, you know, early to mid 2000s and introduce you to teenage Mike here. You know, teenage Mike was kind of a lone wolf, never really accepted anywhere, was absolutely the lowest of the low on the totem pole at school. You know, never really felt like he belonged anywhere. You know, didn't really have people around him that he could call friends. Was basically a walking joke everywhere he went, and just felt like he just was not respected anywhere by anyone, or accepted, or anything, really. Just felt like a complete nobody. And that was true until he got into metal music. And once he got into that music, he started getting into the community. And it was a community full of people who walked like him, talked like him, thought like him, and most of all, welcomed him with open arms. And I'm gonna stop talking in the third person now. You know, when I discovered this music, it felt like an entire world was opened up for me to walk into, and that world welcomed me with open arms. So that gig that I went to a few weeks back, where I hung out with Meltdown, saw Creator, jumped in the fucking pit, got my fucking ass kicked, did some shots, drank some beer, had some fun times, like, that's all why I got into this scene in the first place. It was to listen to some great music. It was to go to awesome shows, awesome concerts, at awesome venues. It was to meet awesome people and make friends. It was to find a place where I felt like I could belong in this world. It was so I could feel like I was a part of something that was greater than myself. And thinking about it more and more, that was the deeper meaning of that day for me. And honestly, it was something that I really needed, because yes, criticism is very important. Yes, reviewing albums is very important, and it's something that I do take seriously. But I really needed that day to put everything back into perspective for me and remind me why I'm so passionate about this music and why I love this community so much. Because it is a place where I felt like I could belong. And back 20 years ago, I did not have that feeling anywhere else in my life. And having that feeling of belonging, of existing, it is why I am where I am now, both career-wise and personally. So, to the metal gods, if you are listening to me, thank you very much for that day in Toronto. That's all I gotta say about that. And now it is time for the Q&A segment. So as per usual, if you want to ask your own questions, all you got to do is join my Discord, be nice for a month, and you'll get access to the podcast questions chat. So the first question is from Boss Antelope 86, and he asks, how confident do you feel about the Packers this season, knowing Rodgers has gone to the Jets? You know what? I don't know what's going to happen. You know, we all thought Aaron Rodgers, when he first started out, was going to flop, and he turns into the Hall of Famer that he now is, which was a really difficult thing for him to do, replacing Favre and all that, but he's had a great career. And the narrative now with Jordan Love is, he doesn't look good. I don't got a lot of faith in this guy, blah, 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 blah. And the thing is, he's had like, what, 2 complete games in 3 years or something like that. So it's really a small sample size, and again, we don't know what he's been working on. We don't know what LaFleur and his coaches have been coaching him on. We don't know if his throwing motion's going to improve. We don't know anything. So all we got to do is just fucking watch. Just like last time, you think we'd have all learned our lessons by doubting Rodgers when he was replacing Favre, but Packers fans, I guess we're just not gonna learn, and we just need to be angry all the time, because that's what football fans do. That being said, I'm guessing a mid-season. So I'm gonna guess like something like 8-9, 9-8, 10-7, something like that. Maybe a wild card berth. I think the NFC North is a little too strong for the Packers to take this year. You know, the Vikings are a good team. Lions are getting really good. They got a great coach. The Bears, I think we're still gonna fucking own them. But yeah, I'm guessing like something around an 8-9 win season. Thank you for your question, Boss Antelope. And the next question is from Fred Durst Simp, aka Blackwater Rust. What is your favorite album out of all the big four, and why? My favorite album out of all the big four is Megadeth's Rust in Peace. It's my second favorite album of all time, so by default, that's gotta be the best one out of the big four in my opinion. Of course, my favorite album of all time being Altars of Madness, like I mentioned in this episode already. But yeah, it's Rust in Peace. I don't think I can say anything about that album that I haven't already said. You know, every single song on that album's a fucking banger. You got Holy Wars, Hangar 18, Take No Prisoners, Tornado of Souls, the highly underrated Poison Was the Cure, Dawn Patrol, which is one of the most banging bass tracks ever, and of course the centerpiece of the album, Rust in Peace Polaris. Dave's guitar playing was ahead of its time on that album. I believe that is when thrash metal peaked. Well, actually, thrash metal didn't peak in 1990. It actually peaked in 1995. There's a whole bunch of thrash metal you don't know about because I'm the best metalhead in the world and I'm smarter than you and you're stupid. Fucking elitists. Anyways, so yeah, it's Rust in Peace. That's my favorite album out of the big four. Followed closely by Master of Puppets. Followed closely by Spreading the Disease and Rain and Blood. Ride the Lightning. Peace Sells But Who's Buying? And all that. So yeah, Rust in Peace is my favorite album out of the big four. Thank you for your question there, Blackwater. And the next question is from JC Wolf. Least favorite fan base in music. I think I've answered this a million times. It's Tool fans. I don't think there's much of an introduction that's needed here. They are the most big-brained, small-dick energy, insufferable pieces of garbage in all of fucking music fandom. They are the Nolan fans of music. They are the Toronto Maple Leafs fans of music. They are the MAGA heads of music, because Tool is the greatest thing to ever happen to humanity. And if you even think of saying anything critical about their gods, oh my god, it's the end of the fucking world. It's to the point where if I meet someone and the first thing they say is I love Tool, I immediately think less of them as a human being. That's how insufferable this fucking fan base is. Alright, I'm done with this one. Thanks for your question, JC. And the next question is from Casey the Terracite Lover. If you could recommend any black metal band not named Enslaved to one who's a beginner in the genre, who would you pick? Well, not Enslaved, huh? Well, I'm actually not quite sure. I think Enslaved is a perfect gateway black metal band. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to take this imaginary wheel, spin it, and see what it lands on, and that's what I'll recommend as the beginner. And it has landed on Enslaved. Seriously? Okay, well, that's the one I gotta recommend. It was on there. Anyways, thanks for your question, Casey. And the next question is from Unironic Sleep Token Fanboy, aka Cody Beinert. And he says, which metal band / album made you feel the most emotional and why? Well, thanks for this question there, Cody. And the answer to it is Still Life by Opeth. That may sound a little bit cliche, but when I first heard that album, I was kind of going through a crisis of faith of sorts. Of course, we know the story that takes place in that album. Back in like the 16th century or something, this guy gets banished from a village for his agnostic beliefs. You know, he's forced to walk away from family, friends, and the love of his life, Melinda. And then he goes back to try and rekindle that long-lost love, only to find out Melinda is now a nun. Eventually, shenanigans ensue. Melinda gets killed. He vows revenge, kills them all, and then he gets executed. Basically, just because of his, religious beliefs that don't fall in line with everyone else's. And, of course, I was going through a crisis of faith at the time, when I first listened to this album anyway, and it was just one that resonated with me so much because, I was getting to that age where I started to believe my Catholic upbringing might be bullshit, and that, the RCC, Roman Catholic Church, is just a very shady organization that has hurt so many fucking people, and I was beginning to break away from that. But the thing is, if your beliefs don't fall in line with everyone else's, you are essentially just fucking ostracized, right? And listening to that album and reading the lyrics and learning about the concept, it just resonated with me so much at the time, and it was such a profound emotional experience for me because I was going through the same stuff, even though I wasn't really a 16th century peasant and I did not have a girlfriend at all. But the main catalyst of this story, it just really hit me like a ton of bricks, and it let me know that, it's okay to break away from the pack, because you gotta be you. You can't be part of a group that you disagree with. You can't be part of a group that does shady stuff like residential schools and pedophilia rings and just be okay with it. And, you gotta be you. You gotta branch off on your own. You gotta be you. Who cares what everyone else thinks? You need to care what you think. Yeah, that album struck a chord with me. I listened to it at the exact right time, and it's an album that I still love to this day. I might be doing a keeping tabs video on it at some point. I don't know when, so don't quote me on it, but yeah, I love that one. Thank you for your question, Cody. And the final question is from Astolfo, the Rider of Black, and he asks, quality versus quantity. Where do you draw the line of too much music being released by certain artists within a time frame, and do you think that less but more refined material is better in the long run? So the question of quality versus quantity does come up a lot, and my answer to those types of questions is always the quality needs to match the quantity. Meaning, if you're gonna have a lot of albums, they better all be good. And that is a very hard thing to do. Death, I don't think they've ever made a bad album. That being said, they only have 7. Dillinger, I don't think they have a bad album, but they only have 8, and 2 of those are EPs. Same goes with Protest the Hero. They only have 5 studio albums plus 1 EP, and they're all good. But when you start getting into the Metallicas and Iron Maidens, where they have a little bit more albums under their belts, you can see the quality starting to drop off quite a bit. And sometimes it doesn't even matter if you don't even have 5 albums out. They could still suck for the most part. We'll go with Guns N' Roses. I think they have 4 or 5 studio albums, and only one of them really are great, another one is good, and the rest is just bleh. So maybe they should have just made one album, I don't know. But to answer your question earnestly, I do have to say, yeah, quality is more important than quantity, but if the quantity is going to be huge, the quality needs to be just as good. And if you feel like your band is going to drop off in quality, then be like Dillinger. Just quit and ride off into the sunset, a perfect band. Thank you very much for your question, Astolfo, and thank you very much to everyone else for your questions. Again, reminding you, if you want to ask questions yourself, just join my Discord, be nice for a month, and I'll give you access to the podcast questions chat. And that's it for the June edition of the Smile Time Variety Cast. Thank you very much for tuning in. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and do all the things. Be sure to have a happy Canada Day if you're from Canada, and have a happy 4th of July if you are from America. And stay tuned for next month's episode, as I will be reviewing Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 1 and 2 by Halloween. Au revoir, tabarnak!